Hey everyone, it's Kyle here, S-Rank, and Jesse the Body Ventura. Talk a little bit about Star Wars Rogue One and some of my thoughts on the movie. Wouldn't necessarily say this is going to be a review. We'll be talking about some of the things that happen in the movie, so spoilers and nitpicks ahead. It was obviously thought it was a really great movie. Is it better than The Force Awakens? I'm not sure I would say that, not yet at least. I've only seen the movie once. I intend to see it a few more times before I make that decision. But I'm going to talk about some of the differences between Rogue One and The Force Awakens. And let's get to it. So, off the back, I'm going to say that I really did enjoy Rogue One a lot. I thought it was great. It's a different movie, obviously, than the previous Star Wars movies. It's a grittier movie. It's a darker movie. It's still a Star Wars movie, so it's not doesn't get too dark, but it does approach the story a little bit differently than the previous movies do, and it has a bit more nuance than the previous movies do, like the way it opens when we first meet Cassian. So we see that, even though these guys are the good guys, they're not necessarily all good guys, and they're willing to cross some lines to do what they think is right for the right for the sake of the rebellion, for this cause. They have their own code, but they're willing to do some dark things, and they're willing to get their hands dirty. So the movie is it's different, obviously, than the previous movies, and one of the reasons why it's different is that it has a different approach to storytelling than the previous movies do. So I would say that, and maybe someone disagrees with me, but I would say that Rogue One is a plot-driven narrative, and the previous movies, I'm going to talk probably most about The Force Awakens just because it's the most recent and easiest to compare it to. But The Force Awakens, A New Hope, and Empire, and Return of the Jedi are all character-driven narratives. And that's to say that in those previous movies, the plot of the movie exists for the sake of the characters. It exists to put the characters in these situations so we can see how they react. The plot is secondary to the characters. Rogue One's obviously the exact opposite of that. It's a plot-driven narrative. The characters exist for the plot. The plot of the movie was set up in the previous movies. How did the rebels get the plan to the Death Star? How did it get to Leia? How did it get in C-3PO, right? These are the characters that exist just to move that plot forward. I don't want to say they don't matter, but, the plot's more important than these characters. Spoiler alert, they all die. I'm sure if you haven't seen the movie, I don't know why you're watching this. And if you had seen the movie, I bet based on what you knew going into the movie, you probably had an inclination that if they didn't all die, the chances were good that a fair amount of them were going to die, right? Because they don't show up again. We already know we haven't seen them in any of the previous movies, right? So their fate is tied to this plot. And the plot is more important than the characters. The characters are a vehicle to the plot instead of vice versa. So I would say one of the problems I had with the movie is, I would say, directly related to that, in that, so there's a scene where Mads Mikkelsen's character, I've forgotten what his name is, I think it's Galen, he's dying. And Jin she's there. She's got to him just in time, but too late because he's dying. So they have this supposed to be emotional reunion where he's dying and she's leaning over his body in the rain, and they're connecting. They haven't seen each other in 14 years or something. And what you would expect to be a very emotional scene for these characters ultimately isn't, because the characters don't matter. The plot of the movie matters. So instead of having this emotional scene between these two characters, instead we have Galen Erso, Mads Mikkelsen's character, instead of saying, I haven't seen my daughter in 14 years. Let's have a tearful reunion right before I die. He says, let me deliver some exposition to you about destroying the Death Star, even though you already know this because you saw my hologram. I mean, that happened. I don't know why. It's just the way it goes, I suppose. And like I said, this is nitpicking. These are minor issues. The film is great, but that's just one of the issues I had with the movie. And so in The Force Awakens, it's opposite of that, right? These characters are more important than the plot of the movie. So when I didn't really have any problem knowing that, I didn't have a problem with the fact that the story is very similar structurally to A New Hope. In fact, I appreciate that because we had gone 20 some odd years without a real Star Wars movie. Sorry, the prequels are terrible. That it was nice for us to get back in with it, with the filmmaker saying, look, we understand the themes of the movie. We understand the themes of Star Wars. We understand how this franchise works and what it's supposed to be. And since it's a character-based plot and not a plot-based narrative, since it's a character-driven narrative and not a plot-driven narrative, using the skeletal structure of The New Hope doesn't really peak me off at all, because it's the characters that matter, and the characters in The Force Awakens are much different than they are in A New Hope. Luke and Rey are different characters. Han and Finn are different characters. Poe and Princess Leia are different characters, and obviously Han Solo filling the Obi-Wan Kenobi role is a much different character. The characters bear little resemblance to one another, so even though the story structure is quite similar, and you might even say identical, I wouldn't say that, but it is quite similar, it doesn't matter because the story exists to serve the characters. So even though we've seen the story structure before, what you should be noticing is that the juxtaposition and the contrast between the characters and how, even though the story's similar, the choices the characters are making are different, right? What you want to see is how the characters grow and operate in the space. So even though Force Awakens is structurally similar to A New Hope, the characters are different. They're much different. And that should be the takeaway. But I guess I can understand you might not see it that way. I don't know. I disagree. I disagree. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of people thought that there was a lot of fan service in The Force Awakens, which I don't really agree with, because I would say that the film didn't really overtly reference too much from the previous movies. I mean, it used a similar story structure, so that allows the audience to conjure up these feelings and memories of the previous movies without ever actually having to reference them itself. So when you understand that, oh, Han Solo is filling the vacuum of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then you conjure up these memories and this feeling of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the previous movies without the film ever having to be like, remember when Luke went to go see Obi-Wan Kenobi? Do you remember that scene? So The Force Awakens doesn't ever actually do that. So it's fan service, I guess, if you want to call it that. I felt was more organic and natural and plot driven and relevant to the plot. And the Rogue One has a different approach to fan service, which is this. Oh, I'm Jyn Erso. Oh, who's that over there? It's Dr. Evazans and Baba for some reason. They didn't like Luke, now they don't like me. I don't know what to tell you. That scene was terrible. It was just shoehorned in. And then I don't know how much longer it was in the movie before it happened, but then there's another scene where, oh, C3PO and R2D2, what are they doing? Let's show you for 10 seconds, even though it's completely irrelevant and doesn't matter. Just shoehorned in fan service, which I didn't feel it didn't fit in with the tone of the movie at all, because that's not really the movie. Was, like we said, it was darker than the previous movies, it was grittier than the previous movies, and then it just kind of it veers off. And like I said, these are nitpicks, right? They don't change the fact that it's a great movie, but I'm just kind of shocked at how they made it past the cutting room floor. Honestly, weird choices. um I don't know. Do they want their Stan Lee moment, I guess? And they decided that Dr. Evans and Baba were gonna be that. I don't know why. Questionable. So another thing I'll say that I didn't think worked entirely was the CGI. Some of it was great, but I don't think it's just because I know the actor is dead. But I thought the Grand Moff Tarkin CGI was really distracting. Just this plasticky rubber man in every scene. Like, I don't know what to say about that, other than that it was completely off-putting and distracting. And frankly, I feel like they have the technology to do it better than they did it. The scene with Leia at the end of the movie, I would say similarly the same thing. Just for comparison's sake, if we look at Ant-Man or Captain America Civil War, where they had similar scenes with de-aging actors, like they had Robert Downey Jr. de-aged in Civil War, and he looked right out of Weird Science. There wasn't off-putting or distracting. You couldn't even tell. It was like, where did this come from? And similar in Ant-Man with Michael Douglas. They de-aged them, and those two scenes. They're both, I mean, I would say they're both important scenes, but Grand Moff Tarkin, Grand Moff Tarkin is he's an important part of the movie. He's a central character in the movie, and he's more important than young Michael Douglas and young Robert Downey Jr. were in those movies, and they just don't pull it off. They didn't nail it, and it's a shame. It's gonna be distracting. It's distracting now, and watching it again in a couple years is gonna be even more distracting as the technology catches up. And like I just said, I think they have the technology to do a better job than they did, and we've seen Marvel do it, and they're both under the Disney banner, so I guess they don't share their tech with each other. Little off-putting. So there's that. What else? Yeah. Again, nitpicks. The movie's great. These things don't really, in the checks and balances, they don't really hold a whole lot against the movie. It's a great movie. These are just some minor things that I saw and some of the issues I had with the movie, but I thought it was great. And we got to see that many Bothans did in fact die, so there's that. I tend to see the movie again, probably a couple more times while it's still in theaters. Got to get some more of these cups. I already got Darth Vader. He's in the car, but got to get the rest of them. Hopefully I like it better the second time, third time around, and hopefully I don't just pick up a bunch of more things to nitpick about it. It might sound like I didn't like the movie, but I did like the movie, thought it was great, and I hope you guys all liked it too. Peace.